Hi, I'm Fran.
Hi, I'm Dré.
And welcome to this episode of Tripod Culture Shock. Right, so this episode's talking about pay gap.
Yes.
Right, so should we start with the first question?
Let's go for it.
Okay. Oh, is there really a gender pay gap? I'm asking that to you first.
No, I really want, to be honest, I really want to know this because I get inundated by stuff on social media, and you see all the people like Jordan Peterson and all of this, which, you respond
it's a whole
straight away.
podcast on him.
Exactly, yeah. But all debunking that this thing exists, that this thing is real.
Wow.
And the reason being is because they're talking about how it's not calculated the right way. It's talking about how, depending upon how you slice and dice it, there are times when women earn more than men. So are we talking about instances where it's only women earning less than men, or are we talking about gender pay gap overall? That's the angle to it. So for me, when I explore this, my experience, I've never seen it personally. But because my experience is that doesn't mean it's not true.
So do you think there isn't a gender pay gap?
No, I actually believe there is. I'm just saying my experience isn't of that. And all the stuff you see on social media is telling you it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But if you're seeing a narrative pushed quite heavily one way, you know there's a counter narrative. And for me to be able to make an informed decision, I need to understand the other narrative. And that's why I want to delve into this a bit more and understand it.
Yeah. So firstly, it's really weird that you get served that.
Yeah.
Because I get served the exact opposite.
Really?
Well, I guess that's pretty obvious.
We get
why.
paid by the media.
Yeah. But I think it's one of the cons, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is convince the world there isn't a problem, and then people look somewhere else. And I think that's really, really worrying that narrative's even going out. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
So I knew that there's debate over how it's calculated.
Yeah.
And I know that it can look a lot worse if you don't take into account part-time. So when we were looking at researching for this topic, you can actually look for figures, and it can start from 7% and it can go right the way up to 20, 30%. So
And it's all from reputable sources as well.
it is. So it probably needs a PR job. Because it's confusing,
Yeah.
and therefore it's easy. When something's confusing, it's easy just to say, oh, it's not an issue, let's not worry about it, or it's not in my area, not in my company. But no, it definitely is a very real thing. I think for the purposes of this podcast, maybe we should just look at the ONS.
Yeah. And to be honest, I'd agree with that. And I think one of the narratives that I hear, so all that's getting pushed to me, is it doesn't exist, it's not real, it's this, it's that. And I think especially when it comes to something as, I want to say, divisive, because the reality that we're in today's day and age, and this is still a conversation, is ridiculous. So I think whatever side of the fence that you're on, you can't discredit the other side. I think it's just an open discussion. I don't think people can say that it doesn't exist because they may not agree with the stats. Go and do your digging, go and figure it out. But I think from our position as business leaders, I think it's really difficult for us to almost say it doesn't exist, because we have to be aware of what's taking place. We have to be aware of what the media is saying.
So why is there confusion?
How do you mean?
So why do people think that it doesn't exist?
I think people want it not to exist because it means that they have to change. It means that they have to look at themselves. And we've seen it with some of the other podcasts that we've done and some of the studies that we've looked into, as in, it's easier to bury your head in the sand and let someone else fix it. The moment you're aware of something and you choose not to do anything, then you're part of the problem. And so you can ignore it. You can pretend it doesn't happen. But you've got to actually look into that data, find out where you stand on it, and actually make a conscious decision. That's why people would prefer for it not to exist.
Yeah, and I have seen things around people saying, well, if women choose the lower paid jobs, then how is that society's problem? If women aren't negotiating hard enough, how is that society's problem? And so I have seen some counter arguments to it, but to argue that it doesn't exist, I think I think the facts very much, depending on what source you look at, because it depends how it's calculated. It's there.
That's a whole different podcast, victim blaming. We can get onto that another time.
We won't be doing that, maybe. Okay, so why is there a gender pay gap?
I would love to know. No. The reality is there's a huge amount of different factors, especially from our studies and what we've been researching. We've seen that, the the current pay gap 7.7%, according to the ONS. That was April 2023, and it's one of the largest gaps that we've had. It is coming down, but the fact of the matter is, according to our Office of National Statistics, there's still a gap in gender. And that's compounded when you start adding additional factors. I think it was occupation, location, qualification, ethnicity, age, you name it, they're all in there. And so we kind of need to delve into that a bit, because I think the stat that the ONS brought out was it's 7.7%, but it increases slightly if you are of like a black descent. But also, if you're a black person born outside of the UK and you've come in, that gap actually increases. And this is taking into account all other things remaining the same: location, qualifications, age, that the figure actually increases to above 12% if you are a black person outside of the UK. Like, why do you think stuff like this happens? Why do you think that is a thing?
Yeah, I think you've also got the issue that it's not easy to calculate. I mean, that one is, isn't it? Because you've got somebody who's moved location, you've checked that it's the same job, probably same qualifications, same experience, so you can immediately see it. But when you look at other things like occupation, is that fair? Is that fair? Because obviously jobs, how much you get paid in your job is often about whether your skills are in demand.
Yeah.
So I feel that one is, you could get right down a rabbit hole looking at people's occupations. And I think the only way you've got to look at this is it the same job? And if there is a discrepancy for any reason, age, race, gender, then that's when you've got to go for it. I don't think occupation alone could be the lens.
So would you say then, when we're coming up with this figure here of 7.7%, it almost needs to be, there needs to be a whole suite or spectrum of the gender pay gaps within the different occupations? Because we've seen it. Last agency that we worked for, we were looking at modeling our pay exploration on a company in the US, and they'd been transparent with their pay. So you saw what the MD earned, you saw what all the different people in marketing earned. The web developers earned more than the MDs.
Yes.
And I've seen before in my industry where people say, the earning potential in digital is higher than the earning potential in say another department, say if it's PR. But the thing is, you have different genders that gravitate towards those particular roles.
Yeah.
And so you'd almost, instead of 7.7, it's like 7.7 for this role, 7.7 for that role.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of figure out what the actual value is. I think this one size fits all is kind of a bit vague, and that's why there's so much people who argue against it, because it's not accurate.
Yeah. And there's loads of different studies.
Yeah.
So if we were just to look at Marketing Week, the gender pay gap in marketing is 16%. So it's higher. So we've got a bigger issue in our industry with pay discrepancy. So you want to kind of see it by every occupation, every location, I feel like there needs to be like this massive matrix. But it's interesting that you said about you seeing people's pay. Yeah. Because obviously, if you're a company over 250 employees, you have to. Yeah. You have to show what you pay by gender, by age, so, and by any limiting factors that could be in play. So has that made a difference? Has that had an impact that it should have done?
So truthfully, I don't know if pay transparency will work on paper. And I think it's because there's the age-old thing of, you brought up in the generation where it's like, you don't talk about salaries, you don't share it, you don't communicate, just because you never know what the other person's earning. And so if you're earning more than them, you don't want it to be that way. But I also get the flip side. I get the benefit to it, where it forces companies to be held accountable, that you can't be paying people ridiculously different. It changes the fact that I like the fact that you have to be able to quantify or qualify why somebody's worth that. So it moves jobs away from salaries into value being given. It provides a clear transparency as well to, if someone else is going, well, that person who does the same role as me earns a lot more, why? It gives them points to go, well, actually, this is how I can change, or this is what I can add to my CV, so to speak, to make myself more, I'd say, I don't say worthy of a higher salary, but, more of more of a candidate for a pay rise, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
you need to know. So I've been in roles.
Yeah.
Actually, it's happened in 2 companies that I've worked at, and the awful thing. One was left on a printer,
Yeah.
the spreadsheet of what everybody earns,
Yeah.
and the other one was an accidental email that got into the wrong hands, not the intended recipient, which again was the spreadsheet of everybody's salaries, and you suddenly then see the shock of massively inflated salaries. And it doesn't just mean C-suite. And on the C-suite, you can really show the difference between the women, because that's another thing. The higher you go, the bigger that discrepancy can get.
Yeah.
So I've seen it firsthand. The marketing director, the HR director has been paid less than the finance director. Why?
Do you know what? That's actually true. And that is usually the case. Weirdly enough, when we were at previous places of work, I'm on a senior directorship team, senior leadership team of the business, and I earned 30 grand less than some of my counterparts. And I think the reason why for me, I always have just accepted that was because I'm considerably younger than my counterparts as well.
Okay.
And so I kind of just accepted it. But when you look at it and you go, I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm running a department. I'm shaping the way this business is moving. And because I'm younger, I'm not worth as much. And you can argue I didn't have the way of experience. Mm-hmm. But if you take me out of the mix, that's just my own personal experience. And it's just a lady doing the exact same role as a man on that senior leadership team. I don't really understand why. You could argue, maybe you can sell one department more than the other, but I just think you're getting into murky water there.
As in which one offers more value?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you're actually at the top of your game and at C-suite, you're at that level. So actually, shouldn't you all be equal pegging?
Well, I'm going to throw something out to you then, because when we started this company, we made an agreement that we would always earn the same.
Yeah, and I earn more than you now. I'm joking.
I really want to clap back on this, and I told you what I'd say to this.
I couldn't help myself then. Yes.
Well,
no, that was...
I'm going to go and sleep with the FD as well. There you go. See how you like that one?
Because you don't think I earned it on merit?
Absolutely not. I work with you. I know. As a soundbite, you are an absolute powerhouse. I adore working with you. You have earned every single penny and you're worth more.
Make sure you captured that.
She said she'd pay me later.
Yeah. No, because we knew that we were going to bring the same value. We were going to put in the same effort. We had similar experiences. And it just... I think it was about output as well, wasn't it? Like what were you actually going to achieve?
I think what's interesting with that is I've never been in a place where, and as we're saying, I was kind of recoiling against pay transparency at the start because I'm going, it just causes so many awkward conversations. But it completely changed the dynamic between us because all of a sudden now the conversation's not around who's worth more because we earn the same. So we can see everything that each other has. We know it off by heart. And the conversation is now no longer around who's more senior, who's earning more, how are we going to progress, because we push each other. Because in order for me to succeed, you have to succeed and vice versa.
Yeah.
And so the conversation is about how do we deliver more value? And the conversation now is more of a merit-based conversation rather than being just an entitlement-based conversation.
Yeah.
So maybe pay transparency, once you get past all the initial conversations and everyone's salaries are normalized, for us, from our experience, does move on to a merit-based conversation, which is where we want it to be.
Yeah. I think the struggle is that everybody thinks they should be paid more.
Yeah.
Like it's human nature. So it creates unrest and that's what companies don't really like to create. So this is what, and there's been pushback that what companies have to publish is not detailed enough, doesn't go into enough, in terms of benefits that people can have. So, but that'll be the reason why is that they don't want to, what's the word? Rock the boat.
Yeah. Because you can imagine the commercial impact for a company who's done this for a significant period of time. Because we were looking at, and there were brands out there like, was it Ryanair has one of the largest paid disparities within the airline industry? It's like 70 something percent.
They were, yeah.
But then you've got brands like, I think it was the Compass Group.
Compass Group,
Yeah.
that had, the females were was it something like 49% of the highest
Yeah.
earners? And so you're like, yes.
And you see these brands that are doing it, and you see these brands who aren't, and it's harder for the brands who aren't. But then the argument comes back to, especially from like the airlines, if you take that, they're going to need to increase the price for the end consumer in order to. But then what they've done is they've made their behavior somebody else's problem.
Yeah. And actually, the responsibility will always sit with them to do equal pay.
Yeah.
And so if you don't do equal pay, you risk getting some serious. It is illegal. It is illegal to do it. So the employment law. So you've got the EHRC, who will come and fine significantly to rectify the mistake. So it's not. It feels uncomfortable for companies to do pay transparency, but I think very soon it's going to be absolutely necessary, because you do not want the sanctions that are coming.
So it's almost the age-old concept of prepare for war in times of peace. So you know it's coming.
Yeah, it is coming.
And we've seen it in every single thing that like brands do. To be authentic, you have to make a change or stand for something before you're forced to do it.
Yeah. And I think people needed to see that the EHRC had teeth.
Yeah.
Because if you see the difference between the 2022, how many big companies submitted late versus 2023, it is far reduced.
Exactly.
So, and I think that's a step in the right direction. But in terms of going back to why it exists, one of the things that I've read, which I think is just a really interesting commentary on society, is the fact that women haven't, in terms of history of working. So if we take that, I mean, you can argue, we traded for tools and stuff. If we say like how work as we know it in rough terms, you'd say like Industrial Revolution. So the men worked.
Yeah.
But in 1920, 20% of women worked compared to 71% now.
Yeah.
So in terms of women being in work, it's a rarely recent history. And that's mind-blowing, isn't it? That
It's crazy. You never actually think of it that way.
yeah, that how quickly that has now pushed to the form of not only are we absolutely everywhere that we should be and pushing to be in boardrooms and pushing for equal pay, but it's fair. I think some people are resting on the laurels that this is quite this is women coming into the workplace, but actually it's a very quick transition into where it is now, and I think we need to push that even quicker.
But if you see some of the brands that we work with, look how long it can take to get something signed off or to change internal perception within a brand. It takes ages. And if women came into the workplace, was it roughly 1920, you're saying?
Yeah, when it's, I mean, 70s was when you saw a decent uplift.
Fair enough. So I'm just thinking like a lot of brands, the established ones, will be older than that. And so changing a whole structure is going to be difficult.
But you can do it.
No,
See,
absolutely.
when it's all about digitization, companies can move. So I think it's not an excuse.
So I'd need to look into this further, but is there like a deadline by when we believe that pay parity should be achieved?
Well, Iceland are at 90%, so they're nearly there. So why can't we?
The thing is, though, like we need to move faster because the stat from PwC is that it's going to take at least 29 years to close the gender pay gap in the UK based upon the current rate of progress between 2011 and 2023. Now, according to ONS, there's been a slight improvement post-COVID, but we're still moving too slow. So, for instance, I'm near retirement age when that kicks in. So, yeah, you kind of want to be part of that change right now.
Yes.
So it's almost as if every successive generation has to do something to drive that down. But no one's going to drive it down unless they see the need for it. I think that's the big thing. It's not a table discussion. It's not the forefront of like business meetings or like when finance is reporting back, are we discussing these sorts of things in the boardroom? I think it needs to be a continual point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's also the whole thing, if we carry on at the rate that we're going at, it's going to take years and years and years.
I think was the figure like 40 or 50 years or something like that?
Which is too long, isn't it? And I just think we need to do more. There needs to be more done by companies, not because they're scared of being fined, but because it's the right thing to do.
comes back to the authenticity though. It's like, you've got to do it before you're forced to do it.
Yeah, definitely. And on my very first job, I don't know if I've ever told you this, I asked for my salary and the HR director said, ask for more of the actual company. Hats off to her.
I've never had that at all.
As a grad.
Yeah.
I came in, I lowballed it, and she told me, and I think that's exactly what companies should do.
To be honest, I did work for a very, very large agency, and when I asked them, and when I tried to negotiate my salary, they said, no, this is what it is. And then when I came in, I found out that other people, same qualifications, same level, were earning more than me.
Did you then kick off and get paid more?
I didn't, because I was a junior at the start, and I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to work my way up and prove it, but I've never forgotten it.
And some of this is about, I think it's hidden, and that's a problem. But also, as a society, we're quite compliant, particularly in the UK. Like it's a bit vulgar to talk about money and be like, I need more, I need more, I need more, and therefore there's a couple of barriers, isn't there?
Yeah, you're frowned upon if you go, I believe I'm worth that, because if a company doesn't believe you're worth it, there's not really that open dialogue as to, okay, why do you think you're worth it? It's just, well, what we're the ones paying, so what we say goes. And fair enough, it's their prerogative to do that. But I do think the accountability that you're talking about, of where we need to move faster, I think we're going to see that changing a lot more.
Yeah. Okay, so should we do the third question?
Yep.
Okay. Right. So how can it be resolved? Over to you. Please sort that out for us.
I'm going to wave my magic wand. It's gone. Problem solved.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dré for Prime Minister. No, I love what you said earlier, and I'd like you to go into a bit more for that. When your first job, you applied for a role, and HR told you to go to increase it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You told me about someone who did that.
Oh yeah, it was on TikTok. It was actually filmed.
Yeah.
The woman saying, right, we're going to end, went into negotiation, realised that the woman on the other end of the video interview was going to lowball it, and said, hold off, we'll take this offline. And then she literally came out of the conversation, called her and said, up it by however much, and then they rejoined the conversation, which I just think genius. That's exactly what needs to be going on. There needs to be people aware of when it's happening, because that's an entry point, isn't it? If you are an HR, you work in HR, you know what's coming in recruitment wise, and you can see that discrepancy, then that's a great place to have that first gate, really, isn't it?
No, I think that's really important there. It's the accountability at a senior level. And a lot of businesses, like we're no different, is you've still got to be commercially viable. So, you know, people, I've heard in previous businesses were like, oh, you know what, if we outsource this work, or these people have come from that particular location, we can get it much cheaper. And the mentality is all around maximizing commercial value. And so this is why the pay gap kind of happens, because it's not a case of how much are you worth, it's a case of how much can I get, or how little can I get your skill set for. Yes. And I think that's a dangerous narrative that we have around this pay gap. Yeah,
well, now you have a role to play to not allow that to happen. So you should be reviewing it, you should be checking. You know, and there's merit-based pay. There's people that perform well and might earn more because of the value they bring to the business. That's going to exist. However, there's definitely markers of that role, that management level, that entry point. You should have parity at that point.
Yeah.
So I think there's definitely something around how much you get paid. There's also a little bit of pushing back on women here from the you're not negotiating hard enough, which, and I think I've told you this before, that because I'm always in a project to do with equality. Even at school, I campaigned.
To be honest, you're just mouthy, aren't you?
Campaign for trousers at primary school because we weren't allowed to wear them. My mum was completely behind it and backed me all the way.
I couldn't even wear. I had to wear shorts.
Oh, that's a different thing. I wouldn't campaign for that. I don't want that.
Didn't have my back, friend.
But I was part of this group, and I remember somebody coming and showing me the BBC programme for how to help women in business and how to get them on. And a massive part of it was confidence. It's all about confidence. And I felt a little bit, because I've always been like confident, and I get it that maybe our gender is a little bit more reserved and hold back. However, let's not just say the problem is us, because it's not. There's definitely power structures in place that are going, actually, I'm getting this resource, she works like a dog and we pay her bugger all, so let's just carry on. That's going on.
To be honest, right, I wrote this down and I've always remembered it because this was a very interesting stat we had in the previous conversation, where you're talking about men going for things that women wouldn't.
Yes.
Talk about that bit, because that I think is something that potentially answers to some degree this question about how can we eradicate it or get rid of it.
Yeah. So it's about risk.
Yeah.
And how much of a job application a woman would risk, as in they can't do it. And I think it was PwC that did the report. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think I think Harvard have done one as well.
Oh, right. Yeah. So it was Harvard, in the Harvard Business Review.
Yeah.
It was that women will not apply for a role unless they have ticked off 100% of the skills. And men are just not there. They're going, I'll take a risk.
Yeah.
I'm happy. Even if I can't do a little proportion of that role, it's fine. I'll work it out.
Yeah, because I think the stat was like men apply for the job when they meet only 60% of the qualifications.
There you go. So that's 40% that they don't know how to do, or they have no experience in, and they've gone, I'll be all right. So that you can immediately see that from a society perspective, that they're pushing it.
Yeah.
That would definitely create somebody asking for more salary than they possibly are worth, because why not? I'll figure it out.
I think that's a massive one there. So I never knew that was a real thing, because obviously I'm not understanding what you're not going for, if that makes sense, or what women aren't going for. I only see what I'll go for. I kind of weirdly err more on the side of women are going, if I can't do it, I'm not going to go for it. I'm not going to risk it. But I do think that there's an element here where line management and the senior people having an ongoing, I'd say, prerogative to bring up the next generation is a big thing, because that helped me and shaped a lot of what I did. So when I'm working with a lot of people and mentoring and doing coaching, I'm sat there showing them the art of the possible. And when I initially speak to them, they genuinely do not know what they can achieve, because they think that they've got a cap, a limit, and that's environmental. So the external influences that they have are saying, right, I can fit into that role, or I can fit into this role. I'm going, no, you can go further.
Yeah.
And I think not enough of those conversations are taking place.
No, completely. And people are also, when, roles get more senior, this is the Sheryl Sandberg thing, the lean in. She's like saying, why are you leaning back out? Why aren't you coming, right to the top, coming on this full journey? I've seen that happen. And I've seen women say, I can't do this role and have kids. And everyone's gone, oh, well done you for choosing your kids, because that's the right thing to do, which, and I get that, and I completely respect anyone's decision. But let's just read what's actually happening here. There is a public declaration in that company that a woman cannot be senior and have a family. You've just allowed that narrative to go out. And I raised it at the time, okay, on my campaigning again, because I was shocked. I was like, no, this isn't my plan. I want to have a family and also progress my career.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. I think, there is still loads of changes that need to happen, but that should definitely be a company's responsibility to say, you can have a family and you do not have to be demoted.
Yeah.
You do not have to take a lesser role because you dared to have children. I mean, that's crazy.
It absolutely is.
And it's putting all the onus on the woman, isn't it?
That's happened to my wife as well, because working in the NHS, they changed the pensions from being like what your final salary was to now being what you've earned over your lifetime. If you've taken time off for maternity leave, which she's done 4 times, instantly lifetime earnings look lower. So even if you end at the same level as a man, I don't want to say unfairly, but they're penalising people that have taken time out of work, which disproportionately affects women. Yes. Because it was always historically seen as women raise the children and take maternity leave.
Yeah.
And I think those sorts of practices are making it very, very difficult for women to have a family and still earn the same as their male counterparts. Whereas the onus, as you're saying, should be, well, anybody can take time off with the children. It shouldn't just be
Yes.
a female.
Completely. Yeah. Shared parental leave has to be a thing, has to be more common.
Yeah.
My husband, with our second child, took the 12 months out with our second daughter, and it was just still seen as really weird.
Yeah.
And it's not weird. He's a dad.
Well,
You know,
this
he
is
wants
it.
to see, he wants to spend time with his kids. Why is it always the woman? And this is why I love the nurseries that are doing this little form of microaggression now, that when the child is ill,
Yeah.
they phone the dad.
Absolutely.
Because
Bring it on.
why not?
Do you know what? Even just from a subconscious level, and this is me being bad because I didn't think about it. Whenever I've got to fill out anything for my kids, and like, who's the contact detail? I put down my wife's number. And I'm like, why? After studying all of this stuff around the gender pay gap and the impact of these micro decisions, what they all add up to, well, I'm putting my number down, because it's little things like that where my wife will then have to leave work, etc.
Yes.
So now what ends up happening, because my wife works away in Wales, I've got to do that.
Yeah. And often, it works. The woman might be nearer, or her job might have more flexibility.
Yeah.
But it's the assumption that's damaging. The assumption that whole penalty of having a baby, because correct me if I'm wrong here, there's two people involved. So why is the woman taking the full penalty for daring to procreate, which is literally what we're talking about?
Yeah. So I think there's quite a few things that we can have on there. So we've talked about pay transparency, we covered off. We've shared parental leave. But the biggest thing is senior accountability, that when you see these people who may not have the experience and they're coming for jobs, of actually going, no, like, you're worth more, being an advocate for them.
Absolutely. And I think resisting the commercial advantage. Yes, it's business, but this is actually illegal. Because
we've done this here at Tribera, where someone's come in order to get them, we've had to pay a bit more to get them. And I've seen us make a conscious decision that we then normalize the rest of the team to match that salary.
Yeah.
So it's little things like that that make a big difference. And yes, commercially as a company, we could make more money if we didn't do that. But part of changing an opinion in society is about each individual having accountability.
Yes.
And whilst we can't change the whole industry, we can change our company.
Exactly. It starts there, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the Harvard link says men apply for a job when they meet only 60% of the qualifications. But women feel they have to meet 100%.
Yeah.
So women will not go for something if they do not feel they can do everything.
Is that about risk then?
Absolutely. But I don't know where it comes from. Like, why are men more willing? We may not even see it as a risk. We may just see this as part of, we're more comfortable with a bit of grey. And we see that as normal, but women aren't.
Or is it that you're just punching and that's what you do in salary negotiation as well, which is why, part of the reason, not the whole reason, but could be the part of why women are lowballing on negotiating salary.
That's a really good point, actually. And it could be a combination of all of that, yeah.
I mean, Hollywood can't even get it right, can they?
No, they
We've
can't.
got Olivia Colman,
Yeah.
who famously said, I'd get paid a lot more if I was called Oliver Coleman.
Oh, yeah, that was all over the news, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Like, if they are in the limelight and they're doing it and everyone is looking up to them and they're coming out going, listen, we can't even get this right. It's ridiculous. But who's advocating for them?
But I think going public with it, which, female actors weren't doing before.
Yeah.
They were just, putting up with it. That's how much they were getting paid. No one spoke about it.
Yeah.
I think it's quite a boss move now to go public.
Fair play. I think more women should do it.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.